My brother-in-law grabbed my 13-year-old son by the collar in my own kitchen and shoved him against the refrigerator because my son beat him at a scholarship competition. He thought I would let it slide because we were family. He thought wrong. I had a copy of the lease agreement, a police report filed within the hour, and a real estate attorney on speed dial. And by the time it was all over, he wasn't just out of my house, he was out of my son's life permanently. I need to back up. I work as a licensed pharmacist at a regional hospital in Columbus, Ohio. I do 12-hour shifts, rotating days and nights, and I have done it for 9 years. It is not glamorous work. Nobody thanks you for catching a drug interaction at 2 in the morning. Nobody sends flowers when you flag a dosage error that would have put a patient into cardiac arrest. You just go home, sleep a few hours, and come back and do it again. My son Theo is 13. He is the reason I do it. His father and I split when Theo was 4. It was amicable as divorces go, which mostly means we were both too exhausted to be cruel. Theo lives with me during the week and spends alternating weekends with his dad. He is a good kid. He is the kind of kid who reminds teachers of assignments they forgot to collect, who holds doors open without thinking about it, who cries at nature documentaries when animals die. He is also, and I say this not as a brag, but as a plain fact, exceptionally smart. Not in the performed, pressured way some kids are, just quietly, naturally, persistently sharp. His math teacher told me in 3rd grade that she had never seen a student grasp long division the way Theo did. His reading scores have been off the charts since kindergarten. I did not push him. I just kept the library card active and kept the lights on. My older sister married her husband 8 years ago. She and I have always been close, the way sisters are when they are the only constants in each other's lives. We grew up moving around a lot because of our father's work, and closeness was something we built out of necessity. When she met her husband, I tried hard to like him. I genuinely did. He was charming at dinner parties, good at telling stories, and he had the kind of easy confidence that reads as charisma until you have known someone long enough to see it differently. His name is not important for this story. I will just call him what I eventually came to understand he was, my sister's husband, and later, my tenant. 3 years ago, my sister and her husband hit a rough patch financially. He worked in sales and his commissions had dried up when his company lost a major contract. They were renting an apartment in Westerville and struggling to cover it. I had purchased a 3-bedroom house in Gahanna 2 years earlier as an investment property. It was a solid house in a good school district, and I had been renting it to a couple who were moving out of state. The timing lined up. My sister asked if they could move in. I said yes because she was my sister and I believed in keeping family close when things got hard. I charged them $1,400 a month. The market rate for that house at the time was $2,200. I did not do it to hold power over them. I did it because family helps family. That was something I believed completely at the time. The arrangement worked well for the first year. My sister called it a godsend. Her husband called it temporary, which in retrospect should have told me everything. He had plans. He always had plans. A new opportunity just around the corner. A partnership that was going to change everything. A contact who was ready to pull the trigger on a deal. None of the plans materialized. The $1,400 rent stayed in place for 3 years because I kept extending the arrangement out of love for my sister and unwillingness to cause friction. Her husband had a son from a previous relationship. His name was Brett, and he was 14, a year older than Theo. Brett spent every other week at the Ghana house. He was a quiet kid, not unkind but socially anxious in a way that his father seemed to interpret as failure. I watched it for 3 years. The way his father commented on his grades in front of people. The way a B- on a science test could ruin a Sunday dinner. The way the man compared Brett to other kids in a tone that was meant to sound motivating, but landed like humiliation. I felt sorry for Brett. I felt sorry for my sister, who had married into that energy and seemed to have absorbed it into her own bones without noticing. The Ohio Academic Scholarship Competition is a statewide program for middle school students. Schools nominate their top students, and they go through a series of regional evaluations covering math, reading comprehension, writing, and critical thinking. The top 3 finalists from each region receive scholarship funds applied to future higher education expenses. It is a meaningful distinction, especially in our district where the competition is steep. Theo was nominated by his school in October. He was one of 4 nominees from his grade. When his teacher called to tell me, I sat in my car in the hospital parking garage for 5 minutes just feeling a specific kind of quiet that I only ever feel when something good happens that Theo earned entirely on his own. Brett was also nominated from his school across town. His father had apparently been preparing him since the summer. There were weekend tutoring sessions with a private instructor. There were practice tests. There were strategy sessions that, from what my sister described, sounded more like boot camp than academic prep. His father had decided that Brett winning this competition was going to be the proof of something, though I was never entirely sure what. That Brett was exceptional, that his father's methods worked, that their family deserved more than what they had. I bought Theo a couple of prep books from a bookstore, and we spent 3 Sunday afternoons going through practice problems together. He would read a problem, chew on his pencil, and then explain his reasoning out loud to me, even when I already knew the answer. I liked listening to him think. The regional competition results were posted on a Thursday afternoon in early March. Theo placed first in the region, Brett placed fourth, which meant he did not advance. I found out from Theo's school principal, who called me at work to congratulate us. I texted my sister a simple message. Theo got first place, just heard. She responded with a heart emoji and nothing else, which I registered as strange but did not dwell on. I assumed she was managing her husband's reaction. I was wrong about what that meant. That evening, I picked Theo up from my sister's house. He had been there after school, which was a regular arrangement since their house was 5 minutes from his school, and I did not get off shift until 6. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed that the lights in the kitchen were brighter than usual. The blinds were open, and through them I could see movement, agitated and fast. Something felt off the way things feel. Off before you have evidence, just a drop in air pressure. I got out of the car. Before I reached the front door, it opened, and Theo stepped out. He was wearing his backpack and holding his jacket bunched in one hand. And he was not looking at me. He was looking at the ground, and that was enough. That was all I needed to see. He was 14 feet away from me, and I could already see that his eyes were red, not tantrum red, not embarrassed red. Something tighter and more controlled, the way a kid cries when they are trying hard not to in front of an adult who has frightened them. Theo. My voice came out low and steady in a way I had not planned. I am a pharmacist. I have watched people get bad news, and I have learned to keep my voice level when everything in me is not. What happened? He reached me, and for a second he just stood there, and I put my hand on his shoulder and felt him exhale like he had been holding his breath for an hour. He grabbed me, Theo said. His voice was smaller than I had heard it in years, by my shirt. He pushed me into the refrigerator. I stepped back into the door frame and there was a sharp thing on the corner, and I think I bruised my shoulder. He said I had been bragging and rubbing it in Brett's face. I heard the words in sequence, but they took a moment to arrange themselves into meaning. I looked at my son's face. I looked at the way he was standing, his right arm held slightly away from his body. Who did this? I asked, though I already knew. It was him. Theo's eyes went sideways toward the house. He was yelling at Brett in the kitchen about the scores, and I was just sitting there, and I said I didn't think the test was that hard, and he just grabbed me. The front door was still open behind him. I could see into the entryway. My sister was standing at the edge of the kitchen doorway with her arms crossed and her face doing something complicated. Her husband was somewhere inside. I could not see him, but I could feel the specific gravitational pull of a person who believes they were justified. Get in the car, I told Theo. I handed him my keys. Lock the doors. He went without arguing, which told me more about his state of mind than anything he had said. I walked up the porch steps. My sister looked at me and I saw her take a breath that she did not release. He is right inside, she said. Almost a question. I know, I said. Her husband came to the kitchen doorway. He was still in his work clothes, sleeves rolled up, and he had the posture of a man who has already decided how a conversation is going to go. He put his hands in his pockets and looked at me. Before he could say anything, I said, "Did you put your hands on my son?" He held my gaze. I was correcting him. Theo was in here talking about his score and rubbing it in Brett's face while Brett was upset, and I stepped in. I grabbed his arm to get his attention. That's not putting my hands on him. That's parenting. You are not his parent, I said. You are my tenant. The word hit the air between us and just sat there. He pushed off the door frame. Excuse me? You live in my house, I said calmly. You pay me $1,400 a month for a property worth $2,200 a month. You have lived here for 3 years on a month-to-month lease that I have extended out of love for my sister. And tonight you grabbed my 13-year-old son by his shirt and shoved him hard enough to bruise his shoulder because he placed higher than your son in an academic competition. So yes, you are my tenant. And what you did tonight is assault. He laughed, the short kind. Assault? Your kid said 6 words and I moved him. That's not assault. That's exactly what he needed. I did not say anything else to him. I turned to my sister. Take Theo's jacket, I said. He left it inside. She went and got it and came back, and I could see her hands were shaking slightly. She handed me the jacket and she said quietly, he didn't mean to hurt him. He was just upset about Brett. I know he was upset about Brett, I said. I understand that's painful for a parent, but there is no version of that upset that justifies touching my child. I took the jacket. I walked back to the car. We did not go home. I drove to the urgent care clinic on Hamilton Road. Theo asked why, and I told him I needed someone to look at his shoulder. He started to say it was fine, and I said, I need it documented. He got quiet after that. He is a smart kid. The urgent care doctor on duty was a young woman who examined Theo's shoulder with the efficient gentleness of someone who had done it many times. She noted contusion of the posterior deltoid, mild soft tissue swelling, no evidence of fracture. She asked how it happened, and Theo told her plainly. An adult grabbed him and pushed him. The doctor looked at me and asked if we were going to involve law enforcement. I said yes. She said she was a mandated reporter and would be noting the presentation. She took photographs for the file. My phone buzzed 11 times during the 20 minutes we were in the exam room. I did not look at it. In the parking lot, I finally checked. 4 missed calls from my sister. 3 texts from her husband. The first text, this is completely overblown. Brett is devastated and you're making it worse by turning a 5-second moment into a federal case. The second text, your son knows exactly what he was doing in there. He was showing off. I did what any adult in the room would do. The third text, if you go to the police, I will countersue for defamation. You do not want to do that. I read each message twice. Then I took screenshots and emailed them to myself. Then I opened a new contact in my phone, scrolled to the attorney I had used when I purchased the Gahana property, and sent her a message asking her to call me in the morning. The police station smelled of burnt coffee and industrial cleaning solution. A patrol officer with a measured, careful manner took our statement. She had Theo and me give our accounts separately, which I expected. She was thorough. She asked Theo several times to describe the sequence of events, and his account never wavered. She looked at the urgent care paperwork and the discharge photos. She looked at the text messages on my phone, particularly the second one. Your son knows exactly what he was doing. She set her pen down. Ma'am, do you know what that message does? It establishes that the respondent believes my son provoked the contact, and that the contact was therefore justified, I said. Which means it's not an accident and it's not a misunderstanding, she nodded. Exactly. That is an admission with a justification attached. That is what makes this more than he said. She filed the report and told me the district attorney's office would review for charges. She also noted the text about countersuing. Let me be clear about something, I said. I am the property owner of the residence where this man lives. He is my tenant. Whatever else happens, I want you to know that. She wrote it down without comment. I carried Theo to bed that night because he had fallen asleep in the car, which he had not let me do in probably 3 years. He was heavy in that specific boneless way of sleeping children. I laid him down and stood in the dark of his room for a moment, just listening to him breathe. Then I went to my home office and opened the file cabinet where I kept my property documents. The lease agreement for the Gahana house was standard Ohio residential, month to month. I had amended it twice to reflect rent adjustments that never materialized because I kept extending the original terms. The conduct clause was on page 3, paragraph 9. Tenant agrees not to disturb, threaten, or endanger the owner, owner's agents, or other persons on or near the premises. Tenant agrees not to engage in unlawful activity on the premises. The premises in question was the house. The person in question was my son. The unlawful activity had been documented by a medical provider and a police officer within the same evening. I drafted an email to my attorney at 11:47 at night. I explained what had happened, attached the urgent care documentation and the screenshots of the texts, and asked her to advise on the fastest path to a notice to vacate based on the conduct clause. I told her I was also seeking a protective order, and asked if the two processes would interfere with each other. She replied at 6:12 the following morning. In Ohio, a landlord can serve a 3-day notice to quit for criminal activity or substantial lease violations. Assault of the property owner's minor child on or near the premises qualifies. She would have the paperwork ready by noon. The confrontation I had not planned for came at 8:15 in the morning. My sister showed up at my apartment. She did not ring the doorbell. She knocked in the specific rhythm she has knocked since we were children, the one I would recognize anywhere. I checked through the window first. She was alone. I opened the door and stepped onto the landing and closed it behind me. She looked like she had not slept. Her hair was in a ponytail that had started the day before and never been redone, and she was wearing his college sweatshirt, which she always wore when she was seeking comfort from proximity to him, even when he was not there. She had been crying recently. Not dramatically, just the residue kind. Puffy eyes and a raw look around the nose. "He wants to apologize," she said. That was the first thing. Not "are you okay?" Not "how is Theo?" He wants to apologize. He knows he went too far. I looked at my sister. I have known her for 31 years. I know when she is relaying a message she believes, and when she is relaying a message she was handed. He sent me 3 texts last night, I said. One of them said my son knows exactly what he was doing. One threatened to countersue for defamation. Those don't sound like a man who knows he went too far. Those sound like a man who was still justifying it at 10 o'clock at night and is now scared of the consequences. She looked at the railing. It was a quiet March morning, the kind where the cold has just barely started to release. "Please," she said. "Please don't do this. If you file charges, it goes on his record. He's trying to get back into sales management. A record kills that. And if you evict us, we have nowhere to go. We can't afford anything in Guyana. Brett's school is here." I let her finish. Then I said, "You did not ask me how Theo's shoulder is?" She looked up. She opened her mouth. "Don't," I said. "Because you know that if I came to you and told you that someone grabbed your child and slammed him into an appliance hard enough to bruise him, the first words out of your mouth would not be about their job applications. You know that. And the fact that your first words to me this morning were about him tells me something I am going to have to sit with for a long time." She started crying. Real crying this time. "I'd been trying to hold it together over there," she said. "It was chaos last night. Brett was upset, and then the police came, and he was so angry, and he was angry," I said quietly. "That's what you said, not he was scared or he was sorry. He was angry. When a person does something wrong and their first emotion is anger rather than remorse, that person is not ready to apologize. They are ready to manage the fallout. There's a difference." She wiped her face. "What happens now?" "My attorney is serving a notice to vacate today," I said. "You have 30 days. She made a sound I had never heard from her before. It was the sound of something that had been stretched too far, finally giving. "Lauren, that's not my name anymore." She knew what I meant. I had stopped being just her sister the previous night. I was now the property owner on the other side of a legal dispute. I went back inside. I stood at the kitchen counter and drank my coffee and looked at nothing. Theo came out in his pajamas at 8:40. He poured himself a bowl of cereal and sat at the counter, and after a moment he said, "Was that Aunt Rachel?" "Yes," I said. He nodded slowly. "Is she okay?" That is the question that nearly broke me. My son, 13 years old, with a bruised shoulder from the night before, asking if his aunt was okay. "She will be," I said. "She's figuring some things out." He went back to his cereal. Then, are we going to be in trouble? No, I said. You did nothing wrong, not one thing. The eviction notice was served by a process server at 2 in the afternoon on a Wednesday. I was at work when my attorney confirmed it. I excused myself to the break room and sat for a moment with my phone in my hands. The counteroffensive began almost immediately. Within 48 hours, my brother-in-law had posted on a neighborhood Facebook group, not naming me directly but describing a landlord who was weaponizing the legal system against a family over a minor parenting disagreement. The response from his network was sympathetic. Landlords in this economy, someone wrote. A real piece of work, another commented. His account of events had been expertly curated. He was the victim of an overreacting, vindictive property owner who happened to be his wife's jealous sister. My phone rang on a Friday with a number I did not recognize. When I answered, it was my uncle from Michigan, who I had seen twice in the past 5 years. He launched directly in. He said what I was doing was shameful. He said family doesn't call the police on family. He said the boys' test scores were not worth destroying a marriage over. I said, my son's name is Theo. He is 13. He was physically assaulted and documented by a physician and a police officer. If you would like me to send you the urgent care report, I will do that. If you are not interested in the facts, I am going to end the call. He stammered for a moment. I ended the call. 10 days after the eviction notice, my attorney called me with something I had not expected. Apparently, my brother-in-law, to his own attorney, a general practice lawyer who also handled traffic violations, was threatening a civil suit. The claim was vague but gestured toward emotional distress and wrongful eviction. His attorney had also sent a letter suggesting that the property I owned had been purchased partly with money that should have been distributed as inheritance when my parents downsized several years ago, which was false, was demonstrably false, and which my attorney described as a pressure tactic from someone with no viable legal strategy. He's fishing, she told me. He wants you to settle and drop the eviction in exchange for a release. Don't. I wasn't going to, I said. The protective order hearing was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Theo and I arrived with my attorney 30 minutes early. The courthouse had the particular weight of a building where people's lives are regularly altered in small rooms. I sat at the petitioner's table and kept my hands flat on the surface to stop them from doing anything involuntary. My brother-in-law sat at the respondent's table with his traffic attorney. He was wearing a sport coat and he had the careful, assembled look of a man who had thought about what to wear. My sister sat in the gallery, not at his table. She was looking at the floor. The respondent's attorney went first. He argued that the incident had been an isolated and regrettable moment of overreach that did not rise to the level requiring a restraining order. He used the words minor physical contact and argued that the petitioner, meaning me, was using the protective order process to gain leverage in a separate landlord-tenant dispute. He noted that my brother-in-law had no prior history of violence and was a committed parent who had acted in the heat of the moment. Then he said something that I had been prepared for but that still landed with physical weight. He argued that my son had been deliberately antagonizing Brett in the moments before the incident by mentioning the competition results in a way that was calculated to cause distress. He said the respondent had intervened as a responsible adult in a volatile situation. My attorney did not use flowery language. She never does. She used documents. She presented the urgent care report, the intake photographs, the physician's notes. She presented the 3 text messages my brother-in-law had sent the previous evening. She read the second one aloud. Your son knows exactly what he was doing in there. He was showing off. I did what any adult in the room would do. She looked at the judge. This was sent 3 hours after the incident. At 3 hours, the respondent was not remorseful. He was still convinced he was right. She then presented the third text, the countersue threat, which she described as an attempt to intimidate the victim's mother from seeking legal remedy. Finally, she presented an affidavit from Theo's school counselor, who had spoken with Theo 2 days after the incident. The counselor noted that Theo had exhibited signs of situational anxiety consistent with having experienced sudden, unpredictable physical aggression from an authority figure. He had asked the counselor whether he had done something to deserve what happened. He had asked whether he was in trouble. A 13-year-old child, my attorney said, sitting in a school counselor's office asking if he deserved to be grabbed and shoved. That is the impact of this man's actions. That is what we are here to address. The judge looked at my brother-in-law over her reading glasses. She asked him directly, "Is your position that the child provoked this contact?" He shifted in his seat. "I believe the situation escalated and I acted to de-escalate it. Physically." She looked at him for a long moment. Physically de-escalating a situation with a 13-year-old child by grabbing him and shoving him into an appliance is not de-escalation. That is escalation. There is a meaningful distinction. She turned to the gallery. She addressed my sister. "Ma'am, you were present during the incident. Can you tell me, to the best of your recollection, whether the minor child did anything physically threatening prior to the contact?" My sister stood. Her husband's eyes found her immediately. They did the thing eyes do when they are trying to transmit a command across a room. My sister looked at me. Then she looked at the judge. "No," she said. "He didn't do anything physical. He just mentioned his score." My husband got upset about Brett's result and it escalated. Theo didn't do anything to provoke a physical response. The air in the courtroom shifted. My brother-in-law said her name in a tone that I hope never to hear, directed at anyone I love. The judge looked at him sharply. "Sir, you will not address your wife in that tone in my courtroom." He pressed his mouth shut. The protective order was granted for a period of 3 years. My brother-in-law was ordered to have no contact with Theo or with me. The order included a prohibition on third-party contact, meaning he could not ask my sister to deliver messages. Any violation would result in immediate arrest. His attorney put a hand on his arm. My brother-in-law was very still. The controlled stillness of someone deciding in real time whether to hold it together. He held it together. Barely. My sister did not look at him when she left the courtroom. She walked out ahead of him and she did not hold the door. The eviction itself happened 10 days later. I sent a property manager because I had no legal reason to be there, and I had no desire to manufacture one. My brother-in-law had retained enough composure to move out in an orderly way. The property manager reported that the house was in reasonable condition, a few scuffs on the walls, a cracked towel bar in the main bathroom. Nothing that spoke of rage or retaliation. Maybe he had more self-control than I had given him credit for in those last days. Or maybe he just knew it was over. Brett moved with him to an apartment in Reynoldsburg, outside the Gahanna School District. My sister stayed in Columbus but moved to a smaller apartment with a month-to-month lease, close enough to Brett that they could maintain their relationship through the separation. Because that is what happened. She filed for separation 3 weeks after the hearing. She told me over the phone late on a Tuesday night, and her voice had the specific quiet of someone who has been sitting with a decision long enough that saying it out loud is almost a formality. "I should have done it before," she said. "I kept thinking it would get better because it had been better. There were good years. The first 2 were genuinely good." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry about Theo," she said. "I'm sorry I didn't lead with that. When I came to your apartment, I should have asked about him first." "Yes," I said, "you should have." There was a pause. Then she said, "Is he okay?" "He's better," I said. "He has a session with the counselor every 2 weeks. He's back to normal mostly. He won a regional math bowl last month. Didn't mention it to anyone except me." She made a sound that was almost a laugh. "That's very him." "Yes," I said. "It is." The civil suit threat evaporated. His attorney sent one follow-up letter and then nothing. My attorney said it was what she expected. A pressure tactic from someone who knew the evidence against him was substantial and was hoping I would trade the eviction for peace. I was not interested in that trade. My brother-in-law is currently on supervised visitation with Brett, pending a family court review of the parenting agreement in light of the protective order and the findings at the hearing. Brett is seeing a therapist, which I hope is the beginning of something. He is a kid who was put under enormous pressure by someone who loved him in the most damaging way possible, and none of what happened was his fault. The house in Gahanna is rented now to a couple in their late 20s who are expecting their first child. They asked if they could plant a small garden in the back. I said yes. They sent me a photo in September of the first tomatoes. It was a small thing, but I stood at my kitchen counter looking at that photo longer than I should have. Theo asked me once, about a month after everything had settled, whether I felt bad about evicting them. I thought about that for a long time before I answered. I feel bad that it had to happen, I told him. I don't feel bad that it did. He nodded like he was turning that over. Then he said, I didn't mean to cause all that by mentioning the score. I just thought Brett needed someone to tell him it was okay. I know you did, I said, and it was a kind thing to want to do. What happened after was not about you. It was never about you. It was about a man who had decided that his son's performance reflected something about his own worth. And when that reflection cracked, he looked for somewhere to put the damage. He put it on you. That was wrong. And the fact that he was in my house when he did it meant that I had the ability to make it stop. So I did. Theo looked at me for a moment with the particular expression he sometimes gets that makes him look like he is 40 years old. Thanks, Mom, he said. Then he went back to his homework. That is what it comes down to, in the end. Not the legal filings or the property documents or the courtroom or the counter threats that came to nothing. Not the family members who called to tell me I was destroying something precious. It comes down to a kid at a kitchen table doing his homework. It comes down to knowing that the space around him is safe. I built that, I protected it, and I would do every single thing again without changing a word.